On a quiet Tuesday, he found a letter taped to his apartment door, his name looped in familiar ink. Inside his jacket, a ring warmed against his palm, a secret promise waiting for the right breath. The hallway smelled like rain and dust, the world holding still while two futures tugged at him. Do you read first or knock? Do you keep faith or run? Love, finally, is the choice you make when your hands won't stop shaking. Tonight, perhaps. Settle in, hit subscribe, and share this with someone you love. Breathe deep and let this tender journey begin now. There was a letter on my door, taped slightly crooked, the way Alex did everything when he was excited or rushing. The tape ran diagonally like a misplaced Band-Aid, and my name, Ben, was written in his tidy slant that always made me feel seen. I could tell it was his favorite pen, the one with the blue ink that reminds you of summer sky after a storm. I knew the pen because he kept it in a chipped mug on my kitchen counter. And I knew the mug because I had bought it at a yard sale with a crack running along the handle, a flaw I loved because it looked like a vein. The hallway smelled like old wood warmed by rain. The overhead light buzzed in that soft way that makes you feel like memory is humming just above you. Downstairs, I could hear Mrs. Gersten's radio playing a Sinatra song. Somewhere, someone's dog barked once and then thought better of it. And inside my jacket pocket, I had a ring. I had been rubbing my thumb along the curve of it for blocks, the way you do when you hold a small, brave thing. I was going to propose to the man who had the right to make any Tuesday feel like a field of fireflies. But there it was. The letter. The room behind the door was dark. The letter was light. And everything else, the ring, the dinner reservation I'd made and then canceled because I thought cooking at home was more us. The speech in my head I'd trimmed and trimmed until it was small enough to say all at once, stalled between the drumbeat of my heart and my breath. I set my grocery bag down in the hall and pressed my palm to the envelope like it might have a pulse. Ben, it said on the front. No X's or O's, no doodles. Simple as a knock. Alex was never good at phone calls when something mattered. He wrote them down. After our first fight, when I told him I didn't know if I could keep dating someone who needed to check his phone 3 times an hour in case his father called. And he told me he didn't know how not to go tight and quiet when he was afraid. He came over with a letter. He placed it on my coffee table like an offering, then sat on the floor 2 feet away and waited while I read. He told me everything in that letter that he couldn't say yet out loud. The way he didn't learn the language of asking for what he needed until later than most. The way loving me made him want to be braver than he'd ever planned to be. He told me he would try. He did. So I ran my thumb under the flap of the envelope and unfolded the paper. It was lined from a pad he kept for grocery lists. A couple of scribbles crossed out at the top of the page, where he'd probably started with too much and then remembered to breathe. If you're reading this, you're home, it began. I hope you put your groceries down because I don't want you to drop the eggs. I glanced at the paper bag by my feet and smiled even as my throat tightened. He knew. I know this isn't fair, he wrote. You deserve conversations, not door letters. You deserve my voice. I will give it to you tonight if you still want to hear it. But first I needed to do the only thing that helps me when everything in me is loud. Walk our map. If you want to, if you have it in you, meet me there. I left a few notes so you'd know where I'll be so we can be brave in steps together. You know how I love a street lit up by rain? How everything feels sharp. Meet me where we sat the very first time I told you next time and meant it. You said, I hope so. I did too. Start there. I'll be waiting at the end. My stomach did something like a twist and a leap. He was making a path. He was spinning the thread I could follow back to where he was or forward to where we were going. Either way, it was us. Sincerely, he wrote, like he always did when he was a little scared. Then he scratched it out and wrote, Love, Alex. Behind the letter, he'd tucked a small Polaroid. It was the square of the park bench near the old elm in Maplewood Square, shot at a tilt that made the trees look like they were listening in. He'd drawn a little arrow on the photo, and a tiny heart that looked like it was trying not to make a scene. I took one breath to steady the shaking in my hands and slipped the ring box deeper into my pocket, as if the ring could hear and needed reassuring. The box was worn at the corners from me checking it too often, the way you peer in on sleeping things to make sure they're still there. Then I grabbed my keys, slid the letter into my jacket, and started down the stairs. The rain had settled into a soft mist, enough to slick the sidewalks and wake up the grass. Maplewood had a way of looking like it belonged in a memory even when you were standing in it. Old brick storefronts, flags clipped to porches, flower boxes that people kept watered and talkative. The square was 3 blocks away, past June's diner and the hardware store with the hand-painted sign. As I passed, the diner door opened and June herself leaned out to shake the mat, her silver hair pinned back with a pencil because she might need to write down your order or your name. She saw me. Then the look on my face, and her smile softened like butter in a warm pan. "Evening, Ben," she called, the way she'd been calling me for 15 years. "You okay?" "Evening," I said, because it felt like ceremony to greet someone who had fed you so many breakfasts. "I'm okay." I patted my pocket for something to do with my hands and felt the ring steady me again. "On an errand, that right?" June's eyes went to my coat. "You take a slice of pie with you for courage. Free of charge. Consider it. A pre-celebration. June." I laughed because it was that or cry. "You don't even know." "I know enough," she said, her voice getting low, the way people do when they walk into a church. "Lemon meringue? Or the strawberry rhubarb that tasted like spring married summer?" "Strawberry rhubarb," I said, because Alex had taught me to like sweet things that reminded you to be grateful. She ducked back inside and returned with a wax paper packet, warm and fragrant. She pressed it into my palm with both of her hands. "Go do what you came to do," she said. "Don't make the future wait too long. It starts whether you show up or not." "Thank you," I said, and meant it 5 different ways. At the square, the old elm spread its arms over the park bench that had been ours long before we knew it. 3 years ago, a September afternoon, the farmer's market had spilled peaches and sunflowers across the lawn, and I'd sat on that bench eating a soft pretzel and wondering why the air felt like a new page. He had been wearing a navy sweater, sleeves pushed to his elbows, hair a little wild from the wind off the river. He held a cup of coffee like it was a talisman against changing weather. He looked like trouble in the answer to it. "You mind?" he had asked, nodding toward the empty side of the bench, eyes already smiling. "It's public," I'd said, and then immediately hated how it sounded. Too hard in my mouth. He sat anyway, but not right next to me. A polite space. He tapped his cup against his leg twice like he had a habit of keeping rhythm when his feelings got loud. After a few minutes, he looked up at the elm and said, "I always think it must be tired from holding everything up." "It's a tree," I said, but softly this time, because he wasn't making a joke. "It likes to." "I don't like to," he'd said, so quiet I might have missed it if the world wasn't holding its breath. "Not always." That day I'd glanced over and seen that the bones of his face were fine and kind, the kind that show age like a story and not a loss. We started talking then about peaches and the way August tastes like a secret you can carry away on your tongue. When he stood to go, he said, "Next time? Not a question." "I hope so," I'd answered, also not a question. Sometimes you recognize the hinge in the door even while you're walking through it. Now, the bench offered itself like a memory and a promise. There was a little envelope taped under the wooden slat, and I laughed, looking around as if the town might be in on the game. A young couple walked by holding hands. A kid on a scooter flew past in a blur of neon helmet, the world not caring and caring all at once. I pulled the envelope free. "You didn't forget," he'd written. "You kept showing up." So did I. "Do you remember the day you told me about your father? You didn't say much, but you didn't need to. You looked at this tree and said, 'He would have loved this.' And I believed you. I wanted to love what you loved, even if I didn't know how. He said we were welcome at the table. He made room for me. Remember that, please, in case I forget to tell you what I need tonight. Go to Manny's next. He still teases me because I went for a hammer and left with the wrong nails the day I met you in aisle 3. Tell him I sent you, and he'll stop giving you grief for not joining the Maplewood softball team last summer." I folded the paper and slipped it in my pocket beside the ring, the 2 small futures pressing shoulder to shoulder. The hardware store bell rang when I pushed open the door, and the smell of lumber and oil made me feel like I could fix something if I just got the right tool for it. "Look what the river washed in," Manny said from behind the counter, grin quick and wide. He'd been my neighbor all 3 of the years I've had here. He was the sort of man who didn't let you forget your favorite brand of light bulb or the date of your birthday. You been talking to June? I asked, because towns like ours are a net. I talk to everybody, Manny said. My wife says it's my petrified talent. That, and knowing who needs a bungee cord before they do. You look like you might need a bungee cord tonight. Or duct tape, he winked. Or luck. Maybe all 3, I said, and placed Alex's letter on the counter. He sent me on an errand. Oh, he did? Manny said, like he'd been waiting for me to catch up. He bent under the counter and came up with a small brown bag. Inside was a note and a keychain. The keychain was a tiny level, the bubble bright and green. The note read, "Man, you hated that I didn't own a level. I told you I could eyeball it. You said, your eyeballs are kind, but they're not that good. Thank you for helping me get straight what needed to be. You want to know a secret? I love how you check the bubble. I love how you let us settle. P.S. Don't join the softball team if you don't want to. Sit in the bleachers with me and yell when we feel like it. You 2 are cut from some good cloth," Manny said, watching me read. You know that? I know we try, I said, and I looked at the level bubble and thought how many times I'd set it on our shelf while he held his breath, waiting for my nod. It wasn't about straight lines. It was about attention. It was about making a place where you could put your hands. Manny waved me toward the door. Go catch him, he said, before he writes a novel with footnotes. The library was next. I knew before I read Alex's note because of the way the town routes you if you let it. The maple trees along Cedar Street made a tunnel, and the library sat at the end like a promise kept. In the reading room, Nora was placing new plastic covers on old books. Her glasses on a chain around her neck, cardigan the color of oatmeal in quiet afternoons. Hi, Nora, I said, lowering my voice out of habit. Hi, Ben, she said, not lowering hers. Your fellow dropped off something for you. Said you might be coming with that look on your face. What look is that? I asked. The look of a man who just realized love is not a straight path but a pretty one, she said, and handed me a library card with my name on it in her careful script. Taped to it was a note that said, 4th shelf down, left side, the book about the pig who meets a girl and learns he's already enough. I smiled. He cried when I read him the chapter about the miracle, I said, my hands remembering how his knuckles were, the way he held on to my words like they were a rope, and he wasn't sure how to grab tight without breaking them. Good crying, Nora said, like rain. We read children's books to each other the winter we realized the news was too heavy for our shoulders. We'd sit on the couch, feet tangled, and take turns doing the voices. He was better at the voices. I was better at keeping my voice from breaking. We met in the middle every time. In the book, a spider saved a pig with words. He loved that. He loved that a web could be a poem and a home at once. The note inside the book was simple. Thank you for teaching me to ask for gentleness when the world tries to make me tough. The next stop is where we made dinner for my father, and he laughed for the first time in months. You burned the onions and pretended you meant to. That lie saved the night. Community garden, plot 11. I'm sorry I left this way. Please keep letting me try to say it right. The community garden was 4 blocks toward the river, the fence draped with morning glories that insisted on blooming even in September. Plot 11 was ours in the sense that Alex believed in public acts of care the same way he believed in private apologies. He showed up with his hands and his time. He'd taught me to rest your palm on the soil before you plant, to feel its temperature like a fever or a blessing. We put in tomatoes and basil and a little square of zinnias he said would look like confetti when they got going. Tonight, the tomato vines had that end-of-season tiredness, the way you do after a good long day. There, nestled among the stakes, was another folded paper weighed down by a small, smooth stone. On the paper, a drawing of a tiny watering can and 2 names in our messy script, seeds we had written in spring. I could see us kneeling there, dirt on our knees, him pushing hair off his forehead with his wrist because his fingers were muddy, me leaning in with a damp cloth to wipe off his nose when the dirt insisted on making him look like a raccoon. It read, my father called. He needs me. He doesn't ask, but I hear it anyway. The doctors say there are decisions to make, and I'll make them with him. I didn't want to write this here, but I wanted to remember, We know how to tend living things that rely on us. We don't always know exactly how much water to give or when to stake, and sometimes the weeding goes sideways. We learn. We keep learning. I'm sorry if I made you nervous by writing this way. If you can forgive me for needing the quiet to say the hard part. I'm leaving for a little while. Not because I want to leave you, but because I want my father to find his way through the dark without bumping into the furniture alone. If you still want to meet me, if you still think us as a thing we get to decide toward, not away from, meet me at the footbridge at sunset. I'll be the one who looks like he's been trying to be brave in the mirror. P.S. Bring that pie June snuck you. I saw it. I want to be brave and fed. For a long moment, the sounds of the garden, bees muttering, a bird in the birch arguing with the sky, filled up the spaces inside me. I had known this call was coming. His father was a quiet man with a loud spirit, the kind who fixed the hinges on the church cabinets and never told you, who loved baseball stats and soup. He had a face that made you think of stories by the radiator. He had gotten smaller in the last year, like a slow erasing, and Alex had been holding his breath. Now he would go to Arizona and hold his father's hand through appointments and decisions and things you don't make a list for. He would cook eggs exactly the way his father liked and pretend not to notice when his hands shook. I tucked the note close to the ring and started toward the river. The footbridge arched over the water like a shrug. At sunset, the world turned honey-colored, the kind of light that makes old things look new and new things look like they've been waiting for you. Our first kiss had been on that bridge, after a concert in the park where a band played old Motown covers and a couple in their 70s danced like they'd invented it. We'd stood side by side and listened to the water talk. He'd bumped his shoulder against mine once, a question. I'd bumped back, an answer. When we kissed, it wasn't fireworks. It was a door opening into a room with chairs you wanted to sit in and a window that looked out on a tree. He was there now, leaning on the railing, his jacket dark with a touch of rain, hair at his temple gone silver in a way that made my chest ache with gratitude. He turned when he saw me and his mouth opened like he'd been holding words with his teeth. Hi, he said, and in that small word was everything we'd ever managed to say right. Hi, I said, and it was the same. We stood close enough to feel how the air changed around us. You found my notes, he said, a little apology in the lift of his eyebrows. I always do, I said. You leave them where I'll look. You leave them in the places we became us. I was afraid if I waited until you were standing in front of me, I'd forget how to speak in full sentences, he said. He shifted his weight, his hand going to the railing, then to his pocket, then back out again like it might look like a magic trick if he did it enough times. It's my father. It's time. The kind of time you can't argue with. I know, I said. I knew it when you started folding all the dish towels in the house. You do that when you're worried. Do I? His mouth tilted. I should have bought us more dish towels. I needed more to fold. We both laughed then, because it felt good to do something ordinary on a bridge that had taught us what ordinary meant when it belonged to the right two people. I'm sorry, he said, and the humor softened into something else. I didn't want to tell you on the phone, and I didn't want to stand outside your door, and I also didn't want to ask you for anything you might not feel ready to give. But then I thought, we don't do this alone. We never did. And I'm tired of pretending I don't need to ask for help. You asked, I said and nodded toward the water. It was a beautiful ask. We stood for a while, looking at the river, letting the sunset do what it does best. Make endings look like beginnings if you catch it at the right moment. I could feel the ring box like a heartbeat against my hip. It was time. Or it was exactly one breath too early and I could wait for the next. Either way, I opened my hand and showed him the box. His eyes went to it, then back to me, as if the point was not the thing but the one holding it. You were planning, he started and then he stopped, breath-catching. Tonight? Tonight, I said. And any night after that if you needed me to ask twice. Or 3 times. Or every day. He took in a shaky breath. Ben. I was going to do it in our kitchen, I said, because sometimes the truth we all need is boring and perfect. I was going to burn the onions on purpose again and pretend I meant to, and then I was going to take you by the sink where the light catches your hair like something holy and say, I want the whole ordinary of you. I want the grocery lists with your handwriting and the way you tuck your feet under you on the couch and the noise you make when you remember a childhood song you can't place. I want to walk with you through the parts that aren't a postcard, too. I want to walk with you in the way that means we are always walking home. Tears were on his face, but his mouth was smiling. That combination did me in every time. I can't give you easy, he said, voice catching on the truth like a shirt on a nail. I can't promise I'll be home for dinner every night. I can't promise my worry won't make me fold dish towels in the middle of the night. I can't promise I won't get quiet when I should be loud. I can't promise my father will get better. I can't promise we won't be tired. I don't want easy, I said. I want true. I want you, at the end of the everyday and at the beginning of the next. We do this the way we've done everything. We write it down when our throats close up. We make soup. We forgive each other for being human. We keep a box of cookies in the pantry for when the world is unforgiving. We ask June for more pie. We make room for the friends who show up with casseroles and stories. We say I need you out loud. We choose it again tomorrow. Tomorrow, he said, like it was a promise that would light the path just enough. And, I said, because a proposal should not be an argument but a prayer. I would like you to marry me. No schedule attached. No ceremony we can't make our own. Just you and me, and the rings we already carry around in the pockets of our days. He let out a breath that seemed like it had been waiting for months to get free. Yes, he said. That was the whole of it. That single soft word that changed the angle of the bridge. I took the ring from the box. It was a simple band, brushed silver, with the word every day engraved on the inside because I believe in the weight of small repetitions and the way they make a life. I slid it onto his finger and it looked like something that had been there all along, suddenly visible. It fits, I said, because sometimes you need to announce the obvious to make it real. It fits, he echoed, and then he stood on his toes and kissed me with that careful passion he had, the kind that held back just enough to know you could take your time. When we broke apart, we leaned our foreheads together the way we always did, like we were hanging a picture and needed to agree where exactly to center it. We sat down on the step at the end of the bridge and opened the pie. We ate it with our fingers, laughing when the filling ran down his wrist, and I caught it with my mouth because sometimes romance is practical. Between bites, we made a list on the back of his last note, the paper wrinkling under our hands. Not a list of vows. Those would come later in a way that made sense for us. A list of next steps. I would drive him to the airport. He would take the level keychain because he loved talismans, and he needed to check the bubble wherever he landed. I would make sure the garden didn't go to seed. He would call me after appointments, and we would not try to solve everything in 30 minutes. I would fly out when I could. He would leave me notes when he was afraid to say the hard thing. And I would leave him notes that said, "Come home when you can, my love." Later that night, after we'd walked back to my place with the quiet energy you have when you've said yes to something and nothing has exactly changed and everything has, he stood in my kitchen by the sink. The light did catch his hair like something holy. He took a small box out of his pocket, another small brave thing, and handed it to me. "For the record," he said, his eyes doing their whole galaxy thing, "I had one too." Inside was a ring that had a river etched into the band, a thin winding line that reminded me of the shape of his smile when he'd been forgiven. On the inside, he had engraved a word too, home. "I was going to ask you on the bench," he said, "but I also knew I'd lose my nerve if I did it first. I think I know myself too well. I hoped you'd ask me, and that way I'd be brave enough to ask you back. Cowardly and honest. That's me." "You're neither," I said, and I looked at the ring and felt something settle. "You're a man with a river in him that keeps finding a way. You're a man who writes letters when his voice gets stuck. You're the person I want to cook terrible onions with until I get better at it." He slid the ring onto my finger, and I could feel the way the etched river caught on my skin like a touch. Not sharp, just present. We stood there a long time and let ourselves be two quiet men in a kitchen doing a loud thing. He left 3 days later. We packed his bag together, folding sweaters and a jacket that could pretend to be professional in case he needed to be the sort of son who looks like he knows what he's doing when he sits across from a doctor. I tucked a photograph into the side pocket, us at the garden, faces round with sun, and he slipped the level keychain into the loop of his backpack. On the morning he flew out, June sent a bag of breakfast sandwiches wrapped in loving grease-stained paper, and Manny pressed my shoulder and said, "Call me if the sink decides it has opinions." We had built a life with people who hold on to you when your hands are busy holding on to someone else. The airport drop-off lane, if you've done it, you know it lives in a time of its own. Everyone is always leaving, and everyone is always arriving. We stood by the trunk and held each other, not tight, but steady. We both cried. It is a relief to cry sometimes where everyone is crying anyway, where you can pretend it's the wind. "Write me a letter on my door," I said into his neck, the words wet. "I will," he said. "I'll tape it crooked so you'll know it's mine." He lifted my head with his hands and kissed me like he'd learned how to from someone who values slowness. I got back in my car, watched him walk into the building, and tapped the wheel twice because I needed to tell the universe to go easy on its edges for a while. The weeks that followed were not a movie montage. They were real. There were long days and quick days. There were calls where we both breathed into the phone for the first full minute because the point was not the talking, but the together. There were nights when he fell asleep on a cot that squeaked, and I could hear it, and wanted to punch the cot for existing. There were grocery lists that were shorter because for the first time in 2 years, I was only feeding myself. There was the garden, quieter now, zinnias still loudly colored because they don't know how not to be. There was the sudden sensation of seeing our town with one eye closed. Everything a little off balance, but still there. He called after every appointment, discussing numbers and words I'd never imagined learning. I learned them quickly not because I wanted to, but because love is a quick student when the lesson matters. We made systems. He put the phone on speaker and we wrote notes. Sometimes he would get quiet, and I'd ask if he wanted me to sing the terrible song about the dog that he loved because it was so bad. He'd say yes. I'd sing. We'd laugh. And the hard thing would become 1 degree less hard. I wrote him letters on my door because promises are only as good as your willingness to keep making them. The first one read, "You are not alone, even when a room tries to convince you it's only you and a clock." The second one read, "Eat something green today. No, Skittles don't count." The third one read, "Your father is lucky to be loved by someone who keeps showing up, and so am I." He sent me pictures of Arizona sky that looked like the inside of a church. He sent me a photo of his father smiling with a spoon in his hand and soup on his shirt. I sent him a video of me failing to fold a fitted sheet, and he sent me one of him pretending to do it expertly while a nurse applauded. We built a bridge across miles and walked on it every day. When I flew out to see him the first time, the air tasted like the desert had decided to be kind that day. He met me at the airport with the level keychain held out like an award, and I hooked it onto my backpack like I'd been given a medal for showing up. We had 2 days that felt like the kind of weekend you remember when January comes knocking. We sat with his father, who once told me that kindness is not a virtue, it's a practice. We practiced. We watched a game and yelled at a team that could not hear us. We went to a small cafe where the waitress called everyone honey and meant it. We walked under a sky that kept showing off, and we let it. One evening, he stood in the doorway of the guest room where I was staying. His father's house was full of family and oxygen tanks and the kind of quiet you get when people need rest more than anything. He leaned his shoulder against the frame. "I'm going to be here a while," he said softly. He was telling me something true as a foundation. "Months more, maybe." "I know," I said. "We will too." He came and sat on the edge of the bed, took my hand, and turned my palm up. He traced the river lines there with his finger. "You said every day when you gave me the ring?" he whispered. "Did you mean it would be every kind of day?" "I did," I said. "Those are the only kind there are." We kept walking. When the holidays came, we video called my sister and her kids and watched them tear wrapping paper like they were releasing birds. We sent each other gifts that fit in envelopes. I sent him a pressed zinnia and a poem about soup. He sent me a list of things his father said that week that made us both cry and laugh, sometimes in the same minute. In January, he got quiet for a stretch that was longer than I wanted, and I wrote, "I miss you in small ways and big ways. The small ways hurt more because they are constant. The big ways hurt sweet like a bruise on a memory." He wrote back, "I read that on the floor of the hospital hallway. and a volunteer asked if I needed water. I told her you had already offered me some. She didn't understand. That was okay. In March, I flew out again with a bag full of cookies June had packed so tight they had formed a new unit of matter. Alex cried when he bit into one and tasted butter and salt and home. We went for a drive in the evening, windows down, radio playing a station that must have known we were in love because it kept offering us songs we said, "Oh!" to at the same time. He put his hand on my knee at a red light, and I covered it with mine, both of us holding on to the fact of us like a rope in dark water. He proposed to me again that night, lying on his back on the floor of the guest room, staring at the ceiling fan, because he said he wanted to make sure it wouldn't ever hurt to ask. It didn't. Saying yes got easier every time I said it. By spring, his father's health had become a story we almost could tell in chapters. Some were tender, like the night he asked for a song and Alex hummed until the room remembered how to be quiet. Some were hard as rocks you have to walk on anyway. In April, his father passed, the way a candle goes when it knows it has given all its light to the room. We held a service where people told stories about how he had fixed the hinges on their cabinets, and how he had sat next to them during a thunderstorm, and how he had shown up with soup when their own fathers had not. The room smelled like lemon cleaner and carnations. Alex spoke last. He said, "My father taught me to keep a steady bubble when the world tries to tilt." Then he cried the kind of tears that respect the work somebody did by the window all those afternoons we didn't see. Grief is a work you do with your hands, I learned. You fold the dish towels again because it helps your body know what to do. You cut vegetables. You carry chairs. You write thank you cards. You sleep and wake and sleep again. You tell the story of the last time you laughed together at a mundane thing, a spoon clattering, a game on TV, a neighbor forgetting their keys and ringing the bell 3 times because they liked the sound. Funerals are for the living, they say. I think funerals are for the living to remember the living and the dead. Everything got quieter after, the way a town does after a parade. Alex stayed to settle accounts and paperwork and a house full of items that had become heavier because they were now entirely objects instead of memory anchors. He found notes his father had written in the margins of a novel and sent me photos of them, a series of exclamation points and the word yes scrawled next to a passage about stubborn hope. He sent me one that read, "We'll order soup ingredients. Don't forget the time." He forgot the time, Alex texted, and I wrote, "We'll remember it twice as much now." He came home in June, just as the zinnias decided to throw a party. I had cut the grass that morning in a nervous pattern and cleaned the inside of the microwave like it mattered. He climbed the stairs with that careful way he had of entering any space where people had feelings, then stopped in my doorway and just looked. At me, at our couch, at his mug on the counter, at the door where I'd taped my own crooked letter for him to read when I was out for a run the week before. He laughed, a sound that contained both exhaustion and relief, and I went to him. He fit under my chin like he had memorized the spot. "Home," he said into my shoulder. "Home," I said back. We didn't rush our celebration. Grief has to eat first. We cooked together and burned the onions this time without meaning to. We sat on our bench under the elm and let ourselves be quiet without making it be about anything. We went to June's and ate pancakes at 2 p.m. because we could. We went to Manny's and bought a new level for the toolbox, which was overkill, but he said he wanted a second bubble in the house just in case. By August, we felt like opening the door wider. On a Saturday that smelled like cut grass and coffee, we stood in the community garden in good shoes and shirts we would never tuck in, surrounded by friends who had watched us walk, and we got married. June brought pies. Manny cried harder than anyone and pretended he wasn't by insisting something had blown into his eye. Nora read a poem about a spider and a pig and the miracle of someone writing your worth into the world. Mrs. Gersten from downstairs wore a hat that had seen more weddings than any of us and clapped, on the wrong beat to everything. A kid on a scooter circled us like a planet. The sky did that thing where it agrees to be kind. We had planned to say long vows, but when it was time, we didn't. We each said the same handful of sentences, ones we had written on sticky notes on the fridge when we were practicing loving out loud in grocery store increments. Alex said, "I promise to write you letters when I'm scared." I said, "I promise to read them slowly." I said, I promise to ask for what I need even when I think asking is a burden. He said, I promise to remind you you're a gift, not a task. We both said, I promise to burn the onions sometimes, and I promise to eat them anyway. We both said, I promise to say yes and to say I'm sorry and to say thank you like it's a ritual that keeps the house standing. We didn't exchange rings that day. We had already done that on a bridge at sunset, in a kitchen by a sink. But we did slip our rings onto each other's fingers again, a ceremonial relaying of the foundation, both of us laughing when they slid home in the same sure way. There is a photograph from that day of us leaning over the raised bed of zinnias, faces close, the rings catching the light. If you look in the background, you can see June carrying a pie with both hands the way you carry a baby, Manny holding a tissue like it might bite him, Nora smiling like the librarian in every book you loved, and Mrs. Gersten frowning at a bee like she was trying to name it. I keep the photo on my fridge with a magnet shaped like a watermelon slice. It makes me thirsty for what we already have. After the wedding, we walked home slowly, our shoes picking up dust, hands joined in that easy way you see old couples do when they've forgotten the mechanics of it, and it's become just like breathing. In our hallway, there was a letter on our door. It was taped crooked. The handwriting was mine, trailed off from the hurry of running out of the house earlier to make sure I had the vows in my pocket. I had written only 3 words. Back in a minute, he laughed when he saw it. He peeled it off, smoothed the tape to itself, and folded the paper like he might keep it forever. Then he slipped it into his pocket. It stayed there for months, a tiny reminder that the big things are often just a series of small, kept promises. We made a tradition then, quiet but real. Once a month, we leave a letter on the door for the other. It can say anything. Sometimes it's a list of things I saw that day I want you to see, because they are better seen together. A child in a cape pushing a grocery cart. A man teaching his grandson how to tie a knot at the park. A sky so blue it made you look up from your phone. Sometimes it's a confession. Today I was short with you because I had a pebble in my shoe, not because you were wrong. Sometimes it's simple, needing your hand at dinner. Always it's in that blue pen from the chipped mug. Always it's taped a little crooked. The ring sits warm against my finger when I wash dishes, when I push a cart, when I hold a railing, when I hold him. It isn't a crown. It isn't an alarm bell. It's a circle. The same kind we make when we sit on the floor and eat takeout and lean against the couch. It's a reminder that showing up in every kind of weather counts for more than any speech you don't give. Sometimes, on Tuesdays after work, we walk to the square. We sit on the bench under the good, tired elm, and we watch people come and go with coffee cups and strollers and dogs that have opinions. He will press his knee to mine and I'll press back. We don't always talk about big things. We talk about the neighbor's new paint color and whether June will finally put the music from the diner into a playlist. We talk about Manny's knee and how he still insists on climbing the ladder to change the sign. We talk about whether the library will start a book club for people who only want to read the first chapter. We make up people's stories, kind and hopeful. Every once in a while, he will pull a letter out of his pocket and hand it to me, and I will unfold it and find that it is only 1 sentence long. Thank you for waiting for me on a bridge when I needed to take a breath before I said yes to the rest of my life. Every once in a while, I will pull a ring from my pocket, not a ring you can wear, but a napkin folded into a circle or a piece of string tied together, and I will set it on the table and say, "We're still doing this, aren't we?" And he will say, "We are," in the good way, and he will put the circle on his finger and wear it while we watch a movie that makes us both cry at the same place, because we like to be consistent. I don't think stories end when you get what you asked for. I think stories begin again. Every ordinary morning is a new chapter where someone makes coffee and someone else sees the light and says out loud that it's beautiful. Every saucepan of onions is a chance to pretend we wanted them just this side of burnt. Every letter on the door is a way to say, "I am here. I am listening. I remember," even when your hands shake and your voice doesn't want to. There will be more bridges. There will be more rings in pockets we forget to take to the jeweler to shine because life is busy, and we like the way they look with all the days on them. There will be more notes. There will be days when the river rises and days when it's low. There will be Tuesdays. There will be Tuesdays where a letter on the door changes everything. where a ring in a pocket gets warm with waiting, where a town holds you while you walk to the places that made you. There will be love, the steady kind, the quiet kind, the kind that writes itself into the margins and the grocery lists and the corners of photographs. There will be love that looks like a man holding a pie with both hands because he knows it matters how you carry sweetness. There will be love that looks like a level bubble settling because someone took the time to set it right. There will be love that looks like two men laughing under an elm while a kid on a scooter circles them like a planet and the sky decides to be kind again. Just last week, I came home to find an envelope on the door, taped crooked. Blue ink, Ben, it said. Inside, a single line. Meet me where the city lights fall in the water like coins. I went down to the river and there he was, holding a paper boat. He showed me how he had folded it, then set it afloat. We watched it drift until it caught on a cattail and rested there, like it had meant to all along. He looked at me, his eyes the exact color of the evening when you trust the next day to arrive. Sometimes, he said, I think every good thing in my life came to me in a letter first. Sometimes, I said, I think every good thing in mine came to me because I chose to read it. We stood together, our shoulders touching the way we had learned to let them in every season, and the river kept going, and the lights kept falling, and the letter taped to our door back home moved a little in the breeze through the window, as if it was breathing. And in my pocket, my fingers found the cool edge of my ring for a moment. And I squeezed, not because I was afraid, but because gratitude is a thing you hold on to with both hands when you can. And I could, and I can, and I will.